Hello, Michael.
Hey Miriam, how you doing?
Good.
Good.
I am.
That is a nice thing that you're good.
What?
It's a good thing that you're good.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you can make it. And so you have a Concom on Thursday, right?
I really do.
Yeah. I hear that you're talking about the that land,
About what?
the land on Wendell Road. Oh, you're not?
Are we?
The right of first refusal land.
Yeah, I guess we would talk about it. I guess it's on the agenda.
Okay. Yeah, because I went to town hall to look at the documents and I
Yeah.
talked to Carrie and Becky. And Becky said that the select board was not going to talk about it tomorrow night because you're going to talk about it on Thursday. And I suggested that the planning board would want to talk about it. So that's a good thing.
What would the planning board's interest be in it?
Well, I think just regulatorily, we're supposed to be included. I think
Yeah.
it's 28 acres. I mean, it just, and it's right on Wendell Road, so it's worth consideration. I don't know if we have any real position on it, but it seems like it's worth, there was some conversation,
Could be a library site.
thought about that. I mean, it could easily be a library site. But I remember last year when we were having these painful conversations with the ZBA and the planning board, it came up that like it used to be a process where it was very clear that the boards got and the town got notice ahead of time with ample time to respond.
Yeah.
And then I guess at some point it didn't. It stopped being that way. But it seems like, things are coming out of chapter. We should have the ability to consider it. I mean,
Yeah.
and the asking price is not that terrible, all things considered.
What is it listed as?
It's like 250 or something.
Oh,
So, it's a chunk of change, but it's
it is a
not.
chunk of change.
It's not
When
outrageous.
I don't really know, I looked online at maps and I just didn't see that there were a lot of mapped wetlands or streams anywhere near it, which means I don't know if the Concom would really have a strong feeling about it,
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
Oh, by the way,
everything has wetlands in it, but
yeah,
it's not like a super high value, I think,
yeah.
area.
Gail, since you're on, I'm going to save myself an email. Because I was gonna suggest this to you as well. Because open space I don't think has to be notified. I don't think Gail was there.
She was.
I was.
Oh, but you weren't responding. Okay. Anyway, did you know about this land on Wendell Road?
No, and I came into half of this conversation, so I don't know what you're referring to.
Oh, so there's land on Wendell Road that was in chapter 61 or chapter 61A that's coming out. So the town has rights of first refusal. So the Concom's considering it on Thursday. The planning board is considering it, I think, on Monday, because we're supposed to be asked. And then the select board decides, but it's 28 acres right on Wendell Road. So I was thinking open space might be interested in checking it out too.
Okay, email Penny Jakes.
Yeah, I thought I would mention it to you. So let's see.
Yeah.
So who we got? So we're missing Zoe and we're missing Graham, and welcome Mary Jo. I got Leslie and Bob Douglas. Okay, cool. There's Zoe and there's Mary Lou. We actually have an audience this time. So why don't we give Graham a moment or two and then we can start. Hey, Gail, I'm going to make you a co-host so that once we start, if someone needs to show up, you can let them in if I.
Okay, will I
Great.
be notified that there's somebody hanging out in the waiting room?
If you click on participants, you'll see, it'll say something with a like blue button that says admit.
So far it says mute. Oh,
Hey, Zoe,
Hello.
how you doing?
Good.
Good. You look very enthusiastic for tonight.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm feeling good. Maybe it's the moon. It's like got big moon energy.
Yeah.
Did you watch the eclipse last night or this morning?
I didn't. Did you?
No, it's too far in the north in the trees for me to see. I did get up to look, but I couldn't see it.
I just never do those things. I'm just sleeping.
So Michael, what am I supposed to be looking at or for?
Well, once we start, which I want to do in a minute, if someone needs to come in, here, you see Graham?
You should get a little pop-up.
Yeah,
No.
Way up at the top, Gail, isn't there a little pop-up window that's saying admit, he's in the waiting room?
yeah. Did you click on participants?
I did. It says find participants, waiting room. Got it. Okay, waiting room.
And then
Graham Sefton, admit.
there you go.
Ta-da!
You have the power. So
Hee-hee.
cool. So why don't I call us to order at 7:03? And I think Zoe, am I correct? You're on for minute taking?
I'm not sure, but I can be.
I think so. I checked the order. But let me just double check. Let's see. So Leslie did it last time. Miriam did it before that. So yeah, you're up. If that's okay.
Yep.
Cool. Thank you. So we're gonna start with public comment, which we haven't really had. Hi, Graham.
Hello, hey all.
So we've got public comment, and I know Mary Jo wants to speak, and maybe Mary Lou or Doug. And I'm assuming we're talking about beavers. I think the one thing I would say is for the members of the committee, as far as I know, the Concom is talking about beavers and the Board of Health is talking about beavers. And I don't know if it's on the radar of the select board, but we're not the first people hearing about beavers. So Mary Jo, I'll turn it over to you.
Hey, y'all.
Welcome, Mary Jo.
Thank you. So I thought I'd start out by reading you. You may have seen some things from me already, but I'm going to read you a quote from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife website. It says, beavers mitigate the impacts of climate change, helping conserve water during periods of drought and enhance wetland carbon storage. They are one of the most cost-effective and sustainable solutions for ecological restoration and climate change resilience. So until recently, I would never have really connected beavers with climate change. But an incident that happened a little while ago on Lake Wyola prompted me to look into the question of beavers. And I learned a lot that I did not know. So I'm aware and have looked at the Board of Health conversations about beaver recently. And I know that both they and the Conservation Commission are going to be involved in working in that particular area that has a lot of beaver and is near residences and where beaver were recently trapped and killed. So I think that that's great. And I'm really glad that they're on it. The reason why I'm still coming to you is because it seems as though both of these entities, the Board of Health and the Conservation Commission, they tend to be more responsive to problems than super oriented toward providing a proactive, programmatic approach to things. So there are three basic ways that you can deal with beaver. You can deconstruct their dams, you can kill them, and you can install water level control devices so that you can coexist to our mutual benefit. And the issue is that for the most part, the Board of Health is responsible for requests that beavers be trapped and killed. The Conservation Commission is responsible for making sure that when beaver dams are breached or when there needs to be a water level control device, that those things are done appropriately, as not to muck up wetlands and mess things up. And they have a fair amount of expertise for dealing with that. But in terms of doing public education about whether or not to choose a lethal or non-lethal approach, or planning a program that would proactively install these devices, there's really nobody that has that job. And my feeling is potentially because of the fact that a lot of the reason why people are doing this and encouraging beavers' lives to be saved and encouraging us to have more beavers on the landscape. A lot of reason why they're doing that is because we are dealing with flood, we are dealing with fire, and we're dealing with drought. Those are three of the major issues that are approaching us with climate change. And beaver help the landscape deal with all of those things. Anyway, so that's kind of my main spiel. I really want to figure out how that we can educate people so there's less misperceptions, how we can get Shutesbury to do something other than their business as usual approach, which has basically been to take dams apart and trap beaver. And so I'm kind of coming to you because I know that all of you have more experience than I do, living in Shutesbury and being involved in boards and committees, with a question about what would be a good way to proceed, and also whether this could potentially be something that you would take up under the category of nature-based solutions to climate change, which I understand is kind of a big thing, being encouraged by the state of Massachusetts. So that's it.
Great. Thank you, Mary Jo. So before we move on, I just want to, Bob, good to meet you. And Mary Lou, I can't see you, but do either of you want to talk to beavers before we move on, or do you have the public comments? I just want to make sure. Okay. Mary Lou, do you?
Yes, thank you, Michael.
Okay.
And Michael,
My name
just so you know, my hand is raised.
Yeah, I just
Oh,
wanted
I'm
to frame.
sorry.
Offer some
Sorry.
information after the public comment.
Yeah, I just wanted, once the
Yeah,
public
okay.
comment was wrapped up, I wanted to just frame something, but go ahead, Mary Lou.
All right, thank you. So my name is Mary Lou Conca. I've lived in Shutesbury for quite a few years, and I'm here to back up everything Mary Jo said very sophisticatedly. She can present herself very well. Okay, so I've been going to boards and talking about this. And what brings me here tonight to talk to you all is, okay, something that may not be in your jurisdiction, but it does involve beavers. And the fact that there was gunfire, okay, so I talked to Chief Kristen, and that was out of her jurisdiction because it was okay because they were pellet guns, but I'm freaked out about that. Right now, just talking about it, my whole body is shaking. I have lost a family member via a gun. So when I hear that that's happening, like right where I'm living, and that it occurred because the pellet gun doesn't have the same law that a regular gun. So it was close to people's homes. That's how I read it on Nextdoor Shutesbury, that someone heard the gunfire during a holiday when people were home celebrating. So if beavers, which I'm learning a lot about, help us with climate, and you people are a climate group, what I'm hoping is that we all can get together and stop this nonsense. It is just not okay. So thank you
Thanks,
for
Mary
letting
Lou.
me. You're
So,
welcome.
so Miriam, before you jump in, what I've thought about this as a topic a bunch, and what I wanted to offer up to the committee was, I think I put it in an early email of like, do we have this be public comment, which we just did, or do we have it to be an agenda item? And what I wanted to basically put out to the committee is, rather than getting into a discussion now about it, the way, with public comment, it's sort of anyone can show up and share their opinions and put things out there for us to consider. It seems like, given the issue and the complexity and all that stuff, we can agree as a committee to just take this on and put it on the agenda next meeting for sort of a fuller conversation. And between now and then, if you haven't looked at the stuff Mary Jo said, you can do your independent research, but we can sort of have a conversation. We can formally invite Miriam to represent the Concom, although she's going to do it anyway. And maybe the Board of Health, if that makes sense, or however you want to proceed. But it seems like, rather than backing into an incomplete conversation now, it's really a question of, is this something we would want to proceed with, at the next meeting or in a January meeting for a fuller conversation? So does that, and Miriam, I don't know if that preempts your comments, or if you want to share your comments in that context.
Thanks, Michael. I think what might be helpful is for me to share some information, because I have information that probably not everybody has. And then maybe it'll help frame our discussion. Because we got several, I could just give you some background. The commission got several complaints about the beaver trapping from people living very close to it who were upset about it. And I did some investigation and spoke with Kat Hilton from the Board of Health, and I went to a Board of Health meeting. I wish more people had shown up. I was the only member of the public there, and I just feel like they had it on the agenda. And I could speak from my perspective from the Conservation Commission, but the public wasn't there. So I think maybe there does need to be another public meeting, and maybe the word needs to get out so people who are really concerned about this can show up to that meeting. But Mary Jo did a great job of summarizing the dynamics. So what happens is, somebody decides that there's a problem with beavers, and then they go to the Board of Health and ask for a permit. That's the process. Usually it's more often than not because infrastructure is getting flooded because there's a beaver dam somewhere. So more often than not, in the vast majority of cases, is the highway department, the Shutesbury Highway Department, approaching the Board of Health. And so again, as Mary Jo said, there's three options. And what Kat said is that, ISOR said, what if the Board of Health had a policy to kind of ask for some sort of an assessment to determine what the risk was before sort of rubber stamping a trapping permit? And what I heard from the Board of Health is that they don't feel like they have the expertise to determine whether trapping is the only way, or whether there's an alternative strategy that's non-lethal that would accomplish the same goal of protecting infrastructure. And just to give you as an example, this situation on the culvert on Lakeview Road where this trapping took place. So the Highway Department told the Board of Health that they had to trap because a flow protection device was not possible. And so they issued it based on that guidance. I went out and looked at, what I raised to the Board of Health is, if there was a beaver dam there and they trapped the beavers, they would need to remove the beaver dam, and then the Conservation Commission would need to be notified, because we would have to issue an emergency certification, and we didn't get a request for that, which means that either a beaver dam was removed without our input, or there was no beaver dam, and I can't tell you which it is. I went out and did a site visit and we didn't see any evidence of any beaver damming at the culvert. I then reached out to Mike Callahan of Beaver Solutions, who is a beaver solutions guy. And he assessed this culvert a few years ago. And what he said is that, yes, you could put a flow protection device in that location. But the reason why they didn't do it was because Pine Brook Camp uses that culvert to launch their kayaks and canoes. And so they didn't want a flow protection device because that would block their access to Lake Wyola. So that's a different explanation than it isn't a possibility. So, I'd like to go back to the Board of Health and the Highway Department and say, could we get an assessment? Because this will come up again in this particular location. And, the beavers there's very specific places where beavers are most likely to cause flooding problems. So we can sort of predict in advance and maybe get some evaluation from somebody who knows how to design these things before we decide in an emergency situation, oh, got to trap the beavers because we can't wait for another solution. The other issue I brought up was if it's really an emergency and like infrastructure's at risk, hiring a trapper takes a few days. Getting an emergency certification to breach a dam takes less than 24 hours. So again, if it's that much of an emergency, then maybe breaching the dam is really the best solution. And that should have gone through the commission for conditions. So I think that the other issue I just want to say is that I've been to some LWAC meetings where this has been discussed with the select board present and CONCOM representatives and LWAC and LWA. And I think that there's some lack of information and understanding about kind of beaver risks. For example, I'm also missing another piece, which was I found out that the highway department maybe and the dam keeper have been going into Wendell and taking out beaver dams in Wendell on Fisk Brook. That was the other thing that I learned at the Board of Health meeting. So I've reached out to the Wendell Conservation Commission about that and their Board of Health.
I'm going to jump in, Miriam.
Okay,
Good.
so that was just it. I just feel like there's a kind of some misinformation among town boards about how to assess these risks.
So what strikes me, and you guys can tell me what you think, but if I'm picking up on where Mary Jo left off, our mandate is about climate and energy. It seems like having a conversation about, to me, this is sort of in a preventative, regenerative strategy. Do we want to promote this, suggest this? And I mean, it seems like if we have a conversation amongst ourselves, doing a little bit of research, if we come to a position that we want to sort of advance this in town, I think we can bring it to the select board, maybe ask the select board to have a joint meeting between the Board of Health, the CONCOM, the Highway Department and ECAC, just to sort of bring the players together and figure out if there can be a strategy, a policy or a strategy or something for town. But does that sit well with everybody for a next plan?
Yes.
Cool. Dale, I see your hand up.
I was just going to say, this is what Miriam reports is chapter and verse for what Mary Jo is asking for, which is a policy that is agreed to and understood by any number of different groups in town. So there's a coordinated effort, not this crosswork patch of efforts here, counter efforts there. So, yeah.
Cool.
I did reach out to all the interested parties and sent an email, which I could forward to all of you,
Cool.
suggesting that we do a site visit, because I think the Wendell Conservation Commission is now very interested in this whole dynamic, because that culvert is very near to the Wendell boundary. So if there's beaver damming, the beaver damming may be in the town of Wendell, not in the town of Shutesbury. Yep. Yeah.
So I would say then that we include the Wendell folks in our conversation of coordinated effort in the whole area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Okay, so I would say in December, I'll just put it on the agenda. And then at that point, we can sort of, if we get to a place of agreement, understanding, common direction, whatever, then we can sort of go forward and engage the select board to do this larger meeting. So
I think I think another example of this, Michael, just, and
I know.
maybe it's bundling too many things, but there was a lot, the whole controversy around the geese on Lake Wapello, right?
Don't do geese.
Don't do geese. Yeah, but it's the
No.
same issue of sort of one hand not knowing what the other hand's doing, the lack of coordination of policy, and
That's true, but we're
That's
the
a-
energy and climate, we're not the coordinate better committee.
That's a meta issue.
I thought that's what we were all about.
Leslie,
I won't be at the December meeting, but I want to just voice support that as the Energy and Climate Action Committee, that we should definitely take a role in this. And if we hand it off to the Select Board or Conservation Commission, that we stay abreast, because it, as Mary Jo said, the beavers are part of climate solution. And that's our role, nature-based climate solutions. So I don't have any faith in our Select Board. So I know Miriam's on top of it, but I also feel like, being that I won't be here in December, I want to say I'm all for making sure the beavers survive here.
okay, thank you, Leslie, and just to clarify, I'm not suggesting that we necessarily hand it off, but I think it's a matter of, we bring it to the select board and ask them for a shared joint meeting with other boards, so we can
Coordination.
coordinate, yeah. So I think that would be the next logical step after our December meeting. So I'm gonna move us on. That was, Mary Jo, thank you for bringing it to our attention and presenting it the way you did. That was very helpful.
You're very
So-
welcome. Oh, and just so you know, this eclipse is also the beaver moon. How cool is that?
Perfect timing.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mary Jo, you made a good case. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think I'll move us to updates, and I think there's maybe two short ones, both of which I can offer up. So one is this National Grid Fleet Advisory Services email that we all got, or that I shared around. And I can't remember if I think Becky sent it to all of us. So basically, it's a program that's offered to towns that have at least 10 vehicles. And Becky called and talked to the guy a couple of weeks ago. We have 12 vehicles, so we're eligible. And apparently because we called, we're now in. And it sounds like from her email that the first thing is they do a scoping call to walk through the program, and then they send the town, in this case Becky, information for data collection, and then they do an intake. And they follow up with preliminary recommendations and then a final report. And I think the idea is sort of look at our fleet and see how we can move it to an electric fleet. So there's nothing we necessarily have to do at this point, but it seems like it's going forward. So I'm hoping, sort of expecting Becky will keep us in the loop, since we asked for that. So as we'll probably all get CC'd, but that's the FYI on the follow-up with that. And then the other thing I sent you, any questions on that one?
Yeah.
Gail, sorry.
What is the fleet, and what vehicles are counted as 12?
The highway department, the fire department, SUV.
Every
or
town
whatever.
vehicle
Yeah,
is a potential fleet member?
yeah. Well, I don't know how they do
What?
it, but you have to have enough vehicles. So I think
You're
it's,
going to use one of those big highway department trucks to carry somebody to a doctor's appointment?
no. The idea is if you have a big enough fleet, then they have an evaluation of like, how can you electrify your fleet? So it might be, the dump trucks, they're not going to electrify. So
I thought this was a transportation thing.
no. This is moving our fossil fuels to electric vehicles thing. So, one could do it, one could do it with the police cruisers, for example. That's easy.
I wonder whether they would want an electric cruiser. They might. I
No,
don't know. That's a-
well, I know Kristen did. I brought it up at town meeting, but I did research in advance of town meeting. I mean, the amazing thing about electric police cruisers, it's 0 to 60 in like nothing, like
You're
1
right.
second.
Yeah, you shred your tires.
Yeah, and and they're sitting, they're not going much miles, so they can recharge all the time.
It's a good point.
So in some regards, it makes sense, others it doesn't. So I think that's what's cool is they're going to do the evaluation and make the recommendations. And I do know from my research this summer that there's increasing municipalities in Massachusetts that are going electric and the market is coming. So it's competitive in terms of pricing. You know, the marginal increase is not outrageous. So that's that. And then the other thing I sent you guys an email, I think it was this morning or something like that, but the Amherst ECAC, I went to their meeting about a month or so ago, and they're having a series of educational sessions. So they have a 2-hour meeting. The first hour is like ECAC business. The second hour is an educational series. And so tomorrow night is one on energy, is on heat pumps. And there's a video they're going to watch, and then ECAC members are going to do Q&A. So I put it on Nextdoor to see if anyone else, you know, in the community wanted to go, but it was just an FYI. But I think I've reached out to the chair of the Amherst ECAC, and it seems like we're sharing information, and they're willing to partner in that regard. So it's a growing relationship. So I figured I'd share the opportunity. So that's that. So we can move on. So the next thing, not terribly behind schedule. We're going to talk about planning communications for the Community Choice Aggregation Forum, which originally was supposed to be in 2 days, and then we pushed it off and had a conversation about doing it in early December, early enough before we get into sort of the holiday vortex, and we've come out of the Thanksgiving vortex. So that was the idea. Last meeting, Zoe and Graham weren't available, and Nate had to leave early, so we didn't get too much into the nitty gritty of that. We still don't have a date for a special town meeting that I'm aware of. I don't know, Miriam or Gail or Graham, if anyone's heard. So, you know, my sense is it's probably not December, it could be January. But I think doing the educational forum in early December, like we discussed, makes sense just to get ahead of the curve. So I wanted to spend like maybe 20 minutes just talking about what we think that might look like. And we had some conversation last time, but does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
Well, I know, Leslie, that you're not supportive of CCA, but we still need to do the forum.
Could you do a forum that's wider than just the CCA? That
Well,
is a community education about the various options for community solar?
well,
Yeah. And that's what I want. That's what I want. I want to be able to educate about community solar and the aggregates so that people really get a real choice.
well, so this is what I want to say. Leslie and I talked about this, but you know, there's two different tracks and there's options. I don't see them as mutually exclusive. And neither one is going to happen quickly. And the idea with community choice aggregation is that we asked the select board to put it on the warrant for a special town meeting, which they agreed to. So it's now going to be on the warrant. And in order to be responsible to the residents, we need to let them know what this is about so they can vote, which doesn't mean that we can't have any other forums about community solar or any other options once we develop those ideas. But we don't have enough.
But how would they know how to vote, Michael, if they don't know their other options?
Well, it's not you vote for community aggregation or you're voting down community solar. They're not either or. And so, and the process.
But unless you have the whole context, how do you even know that?
That's what the whole forum will be about. So I think we can talk about what other options are out there, but we can focus on the idea is to educate people about the question that'll be on the warrant. And in the education thing, I think we can include what are the things out there, but I don't want to create it. I mean, we've been trying to talk about community solar for a few meetings and, you know, given you being away and then missing stuff we haven't followed up. So there's been a gap in sort of the progression of our committee education and our committee discussions. So it's just not as developed an opportunity. So I think we're not ruling anything out. We're just sort of saying we want to create an opportunity to share what we know because we got this far and we asked the select board to have the town vote on it. So.
And what's on the warrant then?
it's a very long process. This is the vote for the town to consider beginning the process of research and community choice aggregation. So there's steps of finding a broker, there's steps of figuring out what the options are, there's steps of looking at, putting out an RFP, there's steps of approving a contract, there's steps of once the contract's out there, seeing who applies, responds, and then there's the steps of the town saying we like what we were offered or not liking what we offered. And in between there is both DPU and I think, is it DOER? There's 2 state agencies that have to look at this. So it's at least a year out. So it's a long process and there's many steps before the town signs on the dotted line and commits to anything. So all this is saying is, yes, the town can start talking to people about this idea. That's really all it's about. And then we have to proceed in that regard. So I know just Leslie, you speak, but I really don't want to get, because we're going to talk about community solar after this, and we're going to have a whole conversation about it. So that's the first thing after this conversation. So I don't know if you want to share something now or if you can hold it, because I think if we don't plan, the whole idea is to sort of be responsible and actually figure out what we're going to do and have it organized and know who's doing what and what we have to do between now and then. So I'd rather spend the
Okay,
time.
Michael,
doing that.
I just want to say one thing.
Okay,
This might be what
yes,
Leslie's gonna say. Just one thing.
But Marianne, I've got to say, I hate doing this, but you are a member of the public. You're not a member
I
of
know.
the board. So please don't interrupt. Raise your hand and I can recognize you as chair. Okay, because that's how these things are supposed to work, to keep it orderly. So Leslie, did you want to speak about something?
Yes, I think the order should be Mary Ann should speak first so that we can make a really much more informed decision. To keep it like in ink, we said we were going to do this and then realize, oh my gosh, what's the hurry? Or let's make it a real well-rounded choice. We invited Mary Ann to speak and I think she should speak before we say yay or nay on the CC3 or whatever it is, CCAs. I just don't want to rush just because the select board said we can do it in December. I think it's a mistake to educate the public on one choice when there are more than that.
Okay.
And
I will say,
actually, yeah, and as the Climate and Action and Energy Committee, I think it's our responsibility to educate the public in what is the most energy efficient that helps the town with climate action the best. It maybe we're going to do both. But to exclude community solar from the conversation at that December meeting, maybe we're ready, maybe we're not. I just say, the town's got a lot of stuff on its plate right now, as we all know.
okay, well, I'll just point out, we as a committee agreed that we were going to present it to select board. So we had that vote and we agreed to do it. And then we did go to the select board and we made a pitch for them to consider it and they voted. So we need to follow through on that. And that's what we're talking about now. So I don't want, we can talk about community solar in 20 minutes if we get that far. So in terms of the forum, I think what we discussed is that Nate, because he's been talking to people, different towns and, brokers is probably our point person for expertise, if that's a correct assumption. And, I'm thinking, in my mind, I think about the broadband presentations. That was probably the biggest, broadest community education process that we had in town most recently. And that was very well done. And Graham, I know you were part of that planning. So it seems like that's the template to sort of, present information and have Q&A. I think what we discussed last meeting, when some of you weren't here, was that we were just going to keep it amongst the town as opposed to invite other towns, because once you start bringing in other towns, it gets more complicated. Which towns you pick and what's their experience. So, I mean, Nate, have you thought about this since I sort of put you on the spot as our expert? Does that sit well with you to sort of do the primary part of the presentation?
Happy to do it. Yeah, absolutely. And I would also agree with your idea about keeping it to Shutesbury. I think at our last meeting, one thing that we were able to to discuss briefly, I think it was Miriam's idea, to really try to do more outreach to other towns that have done CCA already. So, I did several interviews, and trying to gain some of that insight that we can fold into our own decision-making process and education strategy. And I'd be happy to sort of give that initial presentation.
Cool, thank you. Well, Gail, did you raise your hand? Did I see you?
I did. I would suggest that we start as we did with the broadband, as if nobody in the audience knew a thing about CCA, and you start like you did your presentation to the select board, Nate, with here's the broad overview, here's how it works, and then you'll have that whole portfolio of responses that you've gotten from your interviews to answer people's questions. Well, will it do this? Well, you can say, well, and blah, blah, it did this. How about that? And you'll have all that material in response of a proven track record. In other words, not just a theoretical answer, but a proven track record. But once they've been given the outline of how it works and what the warrant actually means.
The other thing that strikes me is, I guess it was about a year ago when we had the select board hosted some solar conversation, and Paul Lyons was the moderator, that they put out an email saying, if you have questions in advance, send them to the select board. And then Paul was able to sort through those and then also catch real life questions. So there was a second person who's doing that and then raising them up and asking questions, which, most likely Nate could answer, but those of us could. So that seemed like a good way to sort of gather questions, even if people couldn't show up, they could get their questions in the queue, and at least sort of look at the themes. So Nate?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, we've got this FAQ on the website, which I think is a good first effort. It covers the basics for sure. But then if you have that solicitation of questions, and then at the forum, you've got a Q&A, then you can feed all of that back into the website FAQ,
Right.
and just really have our best effort at addressing everyone's questions about CCA.
Cool. Okay. Is this sounding good to other folks in terms of a plan? And I think logistics, since it's going to be on Zoom, we don't have to worry about seats. We don't have to worry about food, any of that kind of stuff. Nate, how long do you think a presentation for your part of it would be? Like 20 minutes, half hour?
So I think I've presented CCA 3 times. And I really do think that 20 minutes would probably cover it. 30 minutes sounds like a lot. So, I mean, I think maybe more 20 minutes with as much Q&A time as is needed to cover everything.
Okay, that sounds cool. Miriam, you got your hand raised?
I do. Sorry, I just spilled something all over the floor. Hang on one sec. Give me one sec.
Okay.
All right, I'm good. So, I mean, I think this sounds really good. I think that, one of the things that we need to figure out is how to make sure we get optimized turnout for this. Because people, I don't know how people.
Hold that thought for a minute, Miriam.
That's one thought, is optimizing turnout.
Yeah.
And, just, I think also being aware that a lot of people just don't think they're going to, but don't go to websites to read information. So that's always a problem. So, we need to be able to, really explain things to people. And then I think the third thought I have is that people these are a lot of big words and it's complicated, and it sounds complicated, even though it isn't really that complicated, and people are going to be anxious. And so we need to, make sure that people have a really clear picture.
Okay,
I
So-
wonder, I think I'm wondering about some graphics, maybe some
Yeah.
diagrams or charts showing kind of the flow of where electricity, where CCA fits in the whole picture perhaps, so that when we're talking, maybe there could be some visual for people to look at.
that
Like-
makes sense. Yeah. So the reason I wanted you to hold that thought is I want to finish, I mean, your last point was to the presentation, but I just want to nail down like the presentation part of it, and then talk about the outreach and communication part of it, which I think they're related but separate. So what I'm hearing is if we advertise it as, approximately an hour, but with seepage, depending on how much Q&A we have, that's probably reasonable. I mean, 20-minute presentation, 40 minutes Q&A, that we're probably good if we go over 10 minutes or so. And if we did, I think we talked about maybe a 7 o'clock time. You think that's works for people?
Yep.
Okay, so if we did 7 to 8-ish. And we don't have I think we maybe have a tentative date. Let me just look at my calendar. I think we put something in. But maybe we didn't. I think it was the first week of December. But does anyone who was at the meeting last time remember if we picked a potential date? I'm thinking sort of like the 8th, the week of the 5th is what we maybe talked about.
Is that a Wednesday?
Thursday is the 8th, but I was just thinking, like the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th that week. Or the week after is probably the best time to do it. I don't know if people have any preferences or things they can't do any of those 2 weeks. So no standing meetings, Gail?
No, it's something else. I'm not about.
Okay,
Hanukkah comes late.
say what?
Hanukkah comes late this year.
Oh, okay. That's convenient. Why don't we, I'm just picking December 8th as a day that's not our regular meeting time.
That's
sort
a
of-
Thursday?
Yeah. Does that work for everybody if we did December 8th from 7 to 8?
Could I make a request that we do it not on a Thursday?
That's
Sure.
Concom.
Because I have a conservation commission meeting that night.
That's what I just asked, if there were conflicts.
Right. Well, I was looking at something.
Okay, when in the week of the 5th to the 12th would you not have a conflict, I guess is the question.
I would say just that.
Wednesday, the
Okay,
7th.
So that's my only conflict.
yeah, okay, you want to do the 7th? We'll do the 7th? That
No,
work for everybody?
no.
Who's the no?
Me, I'm a no.
Because you can't come or you don't want to participate?
Because I think it's okay for me to change my mind. I remember when I voted yes, I felt kind of like, oh, okay, because everybody else says so. And again, I think we need to hear from Mary Ann and then see if we can combine the two.
But right
And
now,
I
Leslie,
don't-
we're trying to pick a date. It's so,
I know, but I don't have like my calendar in front of me. So I don't want to rush to do it the first week of December. I know Nate is ready yesterday, so that's not an issue. Maybe there's some graphics and other things. There's still a lot of stuff in terms of getting the word out, but I'm not in favor of going that early December. So
okay.
there you
Well,
go.
okay, well, I think I would just say you would like, I think the 7th can work. I think, we need to set a date and we've talked about it. I also would just say that, after we have a conversation after this topic, if the world shifts and we say, oh my goodness, we shouldn't do it, the meeting's not over. We can decide not to move it, but I think we need to sort of nail down the details of this. If we're going to do it, when are we going to do it? So it sounds like the 7th works for everybody, with the exception of Leslie. 7 to 8, yeah.
Also, in terms of advertising for the meeting and describing the meeting, that it's a forum on CCA explaining it, but also we want to know what you, resident of Shutesbury, are concerned about your electricity. Are you concerned about the cost? Are you concerned about the source? Are you concerned about it's going out when in outages? What are your concerns about your electrical supply? And have them come already with questions to ask us, and also to hear how that is going to apply to anything that is proposed for a CCA.
So here's a question.
Michael,
I
I got
think-
my hand raised.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion that we agree to schedule this for Wednesday, December 7th at 7 p.m.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second,
Okay, any further discussion?
I just
This
want to
one?
say, my concern and the reason why I'm moving it is that if we don't do it the first week in December, the rest of the month is lost. People are busy with holiday stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't think we should postpone this till January. So I feel like we have a window of opportunity, or we're gonna have to delay. And I think we need to kind of open the door to a discussion so that when there is a special town meeting, people will be prepared.
Okay, any other discussion before we vote? Okay, so I'll do a roll call. Let's see, Miriam,
Aye.
Zoe. Nate,
Aye.
Gail,
aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Leslie,
Nay,
okay, and I'm an aye, so six yeas and 1 nay, so we'll pick that date. So moving on, I just want to follow up on Gail, your point about asking people. I wonder if in structuring the forum, if we want to open up with that first conversation, which sort of gets a little bit to, what Leslie and Marianne talking about of, where are people concerned about, it's about CCA in terms of how we would design the options, but it also speaks to gathering that upfront information. So you could either start out saying, we know some people are concerned about where they get their energy from. What are your concerns? And take that in, and that's sort of our listening time. And then we could roll into one of the options that the ECAC has come up with that addresses some of these concerns, is not the total answer, but addresses some of it, is CCA, and we're going to do a presentation on that. So we're sort of giving the information, and then we have the Q&A, which can be about either the first part or the second part. Does that make sense to people? Gab?
Yeah, and when we're presenting that very initial outline, I think it really behooves us to say that in a real summary, that this is leveraging, this system leverages the town's ability to bulk buy and get better deals, but that lots and scores of towns similar to many similar to Shutesbury are already doing this, and it's working for them. So
Okay.
this is so we're not doing something weird or something strange.
Although Shutesbury likes doing weird
I know,
stuff.
I know. We do have that.
We're so special.
Right. So here's a question. Is anyone hankering, Nate's going to do the presentation about CCA. Is anyone hankering to facilitate that first conversation? I could do it, Gail. I think it sounds like you're the one who keeps reminding of this, so you would be another natural person if you wanted to just facilitate that first part. But if you don't want to, I'm totally willing to. Okay.
I'll be there with a chalkboard, with a whiteboard, and write up suggestions as they come from the floor.
Okay. Yeah, I was experimenting with someone today on the Zoom whiteboard function, which is newly offered and actually not bad. So we could play with that.
Okay.
And then in terms of the Q&A, I could do it or someone else could field the Q&A, and I think it's just a matter of what's, actually, I shouldn't do it. Someone else should be in the background looking, having seen the questions in advance that came in, and then as people ask questions in the chat, maybe look for themes and sort of ask, like, 3 people talked about X and 2 people asked about that. So someone want to sort of just do that part of it? It's just asking, Graham, yay, you're volunteering, thank you. Cool. Great. So I'll write this up just as a reminder to us. And then I think, so moving on, the only other part is the communication. So I think what Miriam said is, good, that, we want to get in front of people. We want to make sure that they understand it. It seems like the usual channels that we have are, passively you can post stuff to the website, which is good, but won't attract people. We can definitely do a town announce about it. And I think we can put it on Cricket and Nextdoor in terms of, announcing that. And I guess the question would be, we just have to sort of, to Miriam's point, we have to say what it is, but in an accessible way so that people understand why they would want to come and what the hell it is they're coming to. Does that sound about right? Gail?
I can write up a blurb for the town announcement and send it to you to vet,
Right.
and then send that out in the name of the committee.
Yeah. And I would say, Miriam, do you want to just read it as well, since you
Yeah.
sort of,
Okay,
cool.
and offer suggestions.
Yeah,
Okay,
Yes, actually, I'm
Yeah.
saying yes. That was muted.
cool. Great. And I mean, so
Yep,
today is
put this up-
November.
we should Definitely put this up on Facebook so if we put it up on
Facebook?
Nextdoor, not Facebook.
we have a Facebook page?
No, we don't. Nextdoor, I meant Nextdoor.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, God forbid. And eCricket, people will ask questions. And so there needs to be somebody who we sort of task with being able to respond, I think. If we want to respond, or we could say, you got to come to the forum.
Bring the questions to the forum.
We're a town committee and we can't answer any questions.
Yeah, I think
I don't know which way you want to do it.
I would say, just based on experience, we get ahead of it and say, we're not going to answer substantive questions, but send your substantive questions to the ECAC email or to someone's particular email. We could have them do it so we don't get, well, I think it'd be good if we sent it to ECAC so we can all see it.
Yep.
And if they have logistical questions of some sort, we can respond to those, or we can direct them to the webpage with the answer. There's not much logistical stuff happening, but that would be my sense, because we don't want to get onto an online discussion, that's for sure. That's both not appropriate and a huge headache if we started it. So I think that, Gail, thank you for writing up the blurb. In terms of communication stuff, I mean, we don't need a handout, because we will need a handout going into town meeting, because that will be in person, but we don't need it now. I think we can probably just work off of maybe pulling stuff from Nate's presentation at that point. But right now, I think it's really the presentation and the announcement and the blurb and updating the website. Does that make sense to everybody?
Should I quote the warrant article in the TA?
Say more. I'm missing it.
Well, the warrant article is what, 4 sentences?
The warrant article.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would actually demystify a little bit, because it sounds like it's more than it is.
Yeah.
So Nate?
I recall that one of the steps in developing a warrant article is it not to have sort of town legal analysis, or is there a component to getting a warrant article vetted that might preclude you from circulating it? It's like,
Yes, you're right, because it hasn't gone past Donna yet. You're right. So yeah, let's
Okay.
not do that.
So the answer is no. Good. Okay.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
But we
Thank you,
could-
Nate.
as part of the presentation, we could include a sample warrant article from other towns that have done it, just as an example.
Right. With big letters that say draft.
Sure. But maybe just really quickly, like when I was talking to folks from Leverett, Sunderland, and Whately, there were several sort of common themes that all of the people that I spoke with reinforced. And one of them was that it took a long time, but they were glad that they had done it. And then the communications is a really important part of this. So they all had their own, variations on the strategies that they undertook, but laying that groundwork for folks was an important part of the effort. So just wanted to reinforce that component as being important for a successful outcome.
Did they give you examples?
Oh yes. So Whately sent an example of their newsletter. I think I put it on our shared Google Drive.
Are they in your notes that you sent us?
One of the messages that I can I'll absolutely resend it.
Yeah.
And then I think it was Portia, who's like quite busy, but I finally got a hold of Portia from Leverett. I think she actually is kind of a major force behind their town newsletter, and she mentioned that they used the newsletter as a vehicle for raising awareness and answering questions as well in advance. So yeah, I think if we take that multi-pronged approach to circulating information, it'll be a good thing.
Yeah, I think one thing I would just say, and then we should close out with respect to time, but in advance of town meeting, the warrant will get sent out. So if we have a informational flyer that can get stuck in the mailing, that would be helpful, because everyone's going to open it. Hopefully some people will read it. But we're not quite there yet.
Okay.
Well, thank you for this. I think we're good. And so Nate, if you want to, as you develop the stuff, if you have questions, just, run them by me and we can go from there. But I will let the select board know just informally, and then we can, when we get our communications, we can let the town know, and hopefully we can sort of do it in the next week or two. So before people disappear into the Thanksgiving realm. Yeah. So without further ado, why don't we switch? And I'm just looking at the time. I'm sure everyone's going to be heartbroken, but I think the prioritization discussion, which is at the end, I think we probably have to jettison for interest of time, which is confirming that whole list. But I want to thank you all for doing it. And I think we do have to have that conversation. But the next part of the meeting is looking at what previously discussed community committee initiatives. So way back at the beginning, when we started talking about this stuff, there were things.
Michael,
Yeah.
Just interject for 1 second before we move
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
Just as an FYI, I did not respond to that list because there were items missing from it that I couldn't comment on. So I think that we need a bunch of things got taken off that list somehow
Yeah.
that I was concerned about. So
Yeah. I sent some of the missing ones just about an hour or two ago, but I think you pointed out, Leslie pointed that out as well. So we can, fortunately, we don't have to discuss it tonight.
no,
But what I wanted to do now is at the beginning, when we were starting to figure out where we were going, we had presentations about CCA. Mary Ann talked to us about the community solar initiative in East Hampton with the co-op. And then we also talked about municipal solar, and we talked about promoting systems level sustainable living in town. Those are like three things that we sort of started, but we haven't really made progress. And so what I wanted to do to honor those is figure out, well, where are we at? And where do we want to go with them? And I think we'll start with community solar because Mary Ann's here and we have information about that. I think the the sustainable living, Leslie and Zoe are here, so we can talk about that. And probably the least that resources we have is about the municipally owned solar option. There's a little bit of information, but why don't I turn it over to Mary Ann, who we did invite to talk to us about community solar, to educate us, because I think we, as you all pointed out, we don't know as much as we need to know to make decisions about where we're going. And I think the idea is we got to know more about it. So Mary Ann, you want to fill us in on what, the next steps sort of, and one thing I guess I would say, I mentioned it to Leslie, was looking at it as not necessarily a partnership with PV squared, because as a town, we can't really, from a procurement perspective, identify doing business with a particular place, but it's more conceptually, like if the town wanted to do community solar, what would it look like? What would it take? What's the next steps? What's the timeline? What are the things that we'd have to learn or research? But it's for us to sort of figure out what kind of lift it is and what kind of work we have to do to get somewhere if we want to get somewhere. So I think that's sort of the hope. You've got it, Mary Ann.
Okay, thank you, Michael. I mean, the first thing I want to say is to emphasize again, and I'm happy to loop in with you, Michael, if you're doing the community engagement around what do people want? Like, what does this town really want? Because there are very different ways to do solar development. And it really depends from Co-op Power's perspective ethically on really what the town is and the community is saying their values are, because I have a strong point of view that there's solar development that can be done in a way that's really extractive, and the thing that has created the climate mess we're in, it's not a silver bullet. My concern with the CCA is that it is actually creating the demand for the big solar farms that several of us are working very hard to not have in our town. So if we're then just incentivizing that elsewhere, I think we could justly be accused of NIMBYism, so we're just outsourcing. So I would be, really careful about where that quote unquote green energy is coming from if you're going with the CCA.
Yep.
So I honestly think it just feels way better to me if you start that community engagement from a place of what are your concerns and what are your values and what's a really significant energy transition that's happening. And one of the reasons I got excited about this committee was when you added climate action. So you started to think about it, I hope, in a more holistic way. So, you're not like taking out forests to build enormous solar arrays and thinking like, oh, okay, we're getting green energy. All right, that said, can I share screen?
I think you can, but if
Yep.
you can't, okay.
Yes, you can.
Okay, so I don't know how much you remember of this, so I just wanted to quickly go through some contextual slides. So my approach is I was interim manager of Co-op Power last year. I'm not now, but I still really appreciate their approach to solar development. Co-op Power is a network of community energy cooperatives throughout New England and New York. And we really focus on community-led, community-owned solar development. So we start with our community engagements as an educational engagement with the community about why energy matters, why this transition to renewable energy matters, and how to do it in a way that is regenerative. And we do it from a place that really tries to create economic wealth building for the community or town as well. so that when we develop and finance and support a community solar project, it doesn't get extracted away to some big corporate power, but by the time the array is paid off, then it's generating income for the co-op or for the town potentially in this case, so that it's actually generating money that could be used into your next renewable energy project or for some other use that the town decides on. And I think you probably all know this already, but community solar is not necessarily community oriented. Community solar simply means that it's a large solar array generating for many off takers, right? So it's rather than a residential one in which it's just generating solar for your roof, it's a larger solar array off-site that's generating, and many people are getting a small piece of that. So I always say community solar is misnamed because community solar can be very extractive to the community. It can overrun bylaws and clear-cut forests. Anyway, so community solar itself doesn't mean the community has had much say in it or that the community owns it. So I just quickly wrote up a list of some of the criteria that of the ways that people are thinking about community solar development. Is your value how many big megawatts of electricity that you can do as quickly as possible and get as much profit out of it? That's one way a lot of the big solar farm development has been going. Is the community interested in energy resilience, so that if the grid goes down, then there's battery backup in a place like a school or or a building where people know they can go if they need electricity to charge. Are you interested in doing environmental justice work in which the community solar array is generating for people who don't have access to solar otherwise? So renters or low-income people who don't own roofs, or people who are low to medium income. Are you interested in community ownership and wealth building? Like I just said, are you interested in owning the array? So once it's paid off, it actually is generating for you, not for some big for-profit corporation. And that also plays into town ownership. So I can say a little bit about municipal, Michael.
Okay.
Today, there's stuff that's really emergent that we're in the Inflation Reduction Act that's new. And so I can tell you what I know, but it's really just coming online in 2023. So some of the tax stuff is still being worked out. And then there's also just the ease of consumer use, like Marion just spoke to. And I mean, when we were just talking about what you were just talking about, can you explain it to people? Does it make sense? How easy is the transition? What are people comfortable with? So those are some of the criteria that come up that we generally explore in first engagements with communities. And the reason that we promote the cooperative approach to solar development is because it starts with community empowerment and education first. So we're kind of pro not coming in telling a community what they should do, but really educating and letting them know their options so they can have an informed vote about what they really want, and then structure how you're doing it around what the community wants. I used to work in international development, so I have a strong point of view about not coming in and telling communities what to do before we've talked with them. And then we, through Co-op Power, we have access to financing and insurance, both at the regional level, but also larger financing through People's Solar Energy Fund, which was created to help do community solar projects so communities can own them cooperatively over time. We, when possible, try to include a workforce development as part of the project. There's some good funding for that right now, so it also can potentially help finance a project, but it can also develop good training for jobs that are growing in the whole solar development industry right now. And then, like I said, after the array is paid off, then it starts all the generation that happens after that belongs to whoever owns it. So this is just kind of another graphic that kind of shows the same thing, but in more of a nested system. You have within Co-op Power, the local community energy co-op that's helping us find sites and zoning, and then Co-op Power tends to put together the financing and the project management. Bigger bundles of projects get financed through People's Solar Energy Fund. And then we bring in all of the people who are using the solar from the arrays as members. So we continue to sort of educate, and they seek to serve the ongoing benefits of next projects and the development of the co-op. So I think I said last time that one of our sort of pride and joys most recently was the River Valley Co-op parking lot canopy and rooftop array that's generating most of the electricity for the co-op. And then half of the parking lot is generating solar for low-income customers nearby, about 100 low-income customers nearby. And then we've also done just very small, like, 4 families wanted to gather together and create a small sort of co-op community garden. So we tend to be not greenfield. We don't cut forests. We will consider brownfield projects or land that is really damaged. But mostly we are doing large rooftop commercial municipal solar development. So, but we have done some of these small based ones too. I'm actually I live that's at the Sirius community, so I'm actually exploring what we could potentially do now here on our property. So this is just some of the important elements of putting together a community solar project. Michael, I know we talked briefly about, how, I mean, all I thought we were doing with PV squared was potentially, there was potential for them to just say yay or nay on some of the sites you were considering. So there's just solar siting to figure out what are the best sites for community solar in town, what would be the lease arrangement for those sites, so what would be the cost to use that space. Interconnection agreement with the utility is pretty good in the state. I mean, Massachusetts is probably one of the best states for community solar development right now. Like Maine, you can't get an interconnection agreement for like years and years.
Wow.
But right now, because we have really good state policy, interconnection agreement usually has not been the thing to hold us up. But you do want to check that early on with the utility to make sure you have the necessary lines and the interconnection agreement. We tend to work with a good community partner. If you are doing something that serves low and medium income community members, we try to bring in a nonprofit organization that has the trust of those community members. And then, of course, you need to put together, almost every community solar project comes down to how big depends on what you can pencil out in terms of the financing, putting together the loans for the construction, and then for the ongoing project management until the array pays it off. Are there any questions about that?
Yeah.
I just said a lot very fast.
Yeah, I was actually thinking it'd be good maybe just finish that and then have a conversation.
Okay.
It'd be better.
I see
Okay.
we have some hands raised, Michael.
No, I know. I just want
Oh, wait.
Marianne to go through it.
All right. All right. So basically, community solar financing starts with some sort of a small pre-development loan, which we've been getting through People's Solar Energy Fund, and that money is generally so that you can do those things like, is this roof viable? Is this a good solar site? Does this roof need, repair, or does it need some additional support? I mean, so everything you need in terms of like the lease arrangement, the interconnection agreement, the viability of the roof, all of those things. We've put together pre-development loans to put all of those things in place that you need to then go get a construction loan, generally from a credit union or bank. Mostly we've been talking to the 5 colleges credit union who are really interested in community solar. Once you've got the construction loan, Co-op Power does project management through that process. The town would pick who installs it. What's in the community industry, it's called the EPC, which is short for procurement, construction, and engineering. So that's basically called your solar installer. But you would have a pick of who you're doing that with. And then how we used to get the 30% discount through the investment tax credit was to bring a tax equity partner in towards the end. So the way the law is set up is that if you bring in an investment tax credit, the only person who could take that investment tax credit is somebody who has a large appetite for that tax.
Yeah.
So if you think about so the River Valley Co-op project altogether was close to $4 million. So we're then looking for somebody who had a pretty big tax appetite. And that was the way you could get a 30% discount on the cost of construction, right? So they would come in as an owner for about 7 to 10 years until that amount was paid out. And then the co-op would own it, or the town would own it. So we put together a combination of that tax equity partner, the bank loan, and then Co-op Power members have sponsor equity in the project. So the financing would be those kind of 3 things. And those buy out the construction loan. And then those get paid out through generation of the array over time. I know that's a little complicated too. There's a lot of stuff coming online in the Inflation Reduction Act that is good news for municipal community solar. There are upfront incentives, which means that these are things that help pay off the cost of the array upfront. They're not paid off through production-based income over time. There are new rebates. The USDA has a new Rural Electric for America program that got additional money. So there might be grants to do this. There are the smart incentives through the utility. There's additional adders, meaning there's even additional kind of rebates for if you do a low to medium income customer array. If you're siting on, say, a landfill or a brownfield site, and if you're working for include a workforce development. So the way these work for towns now is that instead of bringing in that tax equity partner, that 30% I talked about, the town can apply to the government and get that 30% back. So you don't have to get a tax equity partner. You could get kind of very quickly, if you qualify, a 30% back from the federal government as a town for doing that. And if you have some of these additional adders, it can add up to close to 50% of the array paid off by the federal government. So that's the new Inflation Reduction Act incentives. There's additional incentives if you buy if you buy American in terms of the solar arrays, the steel, the construction. And then they're also offering some new subsidized loans and guarantees for the actual construction and loans that go on, as well as some technical assistance in how to. And then production-based incentives are like, once you have the array up and running, then the state has a lot of production-based arrays, which is increasing a couple of cents or more per kilowatt hour that the solar energy generates. So there is what the utility pays you for the generation. The state will pay you more on top of that, so you can pay the array off even faster. If you are like you're doing a low income array, you like have special siting or workforce development. And then, that I'm not going to go much into SRECs, but there's also ways in which you can sell the renewable energy credits on an open marketplace that can generate even more income to pay it off faster. I'm going to stop there, Michael, because I feel like I've just given you but I hope that gives you kind of a sense of what's in play and how you can do it. And also maybe a little taste about why it matters to do it this way.
Cool. Thank you, Mary Ann. So Miriam, why don't you go first, and then Gail, you can go next and questions wise.
Yeah, hi. So thanks, Marianne. That was really super helpful. I really appreciated it. So a couple questions. One is, I've heard people sort of bandy about that for a town, the population of Shutesbury, we would need approximately 6 megawatts of production. I might be wrong about that, but that was a number I've heard. And I don't know currently in the state of the industry how many acres would be needed for a solar array, like a single array, to meet that need. So that was question number one. And the other question I had is, has Co-op Solar done a project that size for a town before?
So you're thinking just one solar array that does 6 megawatts of power?
Well, I don't know if it would need to be one or if it would be broken up into separate. I don't know. I mean, that's a question. So, I mean, I think the acreage would be the same, even if it's segmented. So that was the other question, was whether you've done it for a town before and
No.
Something that big.
No, we haven't. We have some in development at the moment, but but no, that would be new territory for us.
Okay.
And I can find out for you, Miriam, exactly about how much acreage would be needed for 6 megawatts. I don't have that, but if you're interested to know that, I can get back to you with that information.
Yeah, just be useful to know.
It's
I mean,
about the
it's
size
going to
of
be
Wheelock.
it's kind of like it's going to be kind of a ballpark, because there's always, I mean, one thing you should know is every community solar development is its own creative adventure in terms of, the site, the community, the financing, but I can give you some parameters around what that might look like if you're thinking about doing one 6 megawatt array.
Yeah. And Miriam, I mean, that's what the size of Wheelock is. So it's going to be similar acreage.
Yeah, I guess.
Correct.
Yeah.
30
Yeah.
acres.
Yeah. So Gail?
Oh,
Yeah, we've got our very own on our road.
So let us assume that we don't have the acreage or rooftops in Shutesbury proper to do that. How would you go about finding rooftops or parking lots or someplace else, like you've arranged for the co-op? The array would be over there, the electricity comes here. How would you go about finding that place?
Well, it doesn't necessarily need to be in your town. It
No,
needs
I'm
in your
assuming it won't
utility.
be.
You're assuming it won't be.
Yeah, given that it will not be, how do you go about finding the place where it would be?
But you want the town to own it?
Yes.
That would be an interesting challenge.
I thought that's what you
I mean,
described.
I was thinking you were first thinking about sites, maybe more than one site, but I mean, I wouldn't just think in terms of 6 megawatt site. I would start thinking about what site could the town own, or that does the town own, that could work for community solar.
Right. So Mary Ann, I would just say, like, this has sort of been part of our municipal solar conversation, but there's very limited municipal buildings. So, you know, and of the buildings, not all of them are appropriate. That was sort of one of the questions that I had asked you to look into. And then in terms of town-owned land that's not on a building, that would be ground mounted, there's not a lot of it either. So I think in our initial conversation, a few months ago, it became pretty clear that we don't have enough space to generate projects that would create enough energy for what the town needed. You could do lots of little projects, you know, which, you know, so one could say, yes, we should have municipally owned solar on all the municipal buildings, or the most that can host them. But then that would primarily be feeding the needs of the town, and maybe some excess to be determined. I don't know how you distribute the excess, but if it's just sort of generating energy and revenue for the town, but there's, you know, we don't have any big spaces that are not forested and publicly owned.
Or wetlands that can't be developed.
Yeah, so that's sort of the challenge that gets to Gail's issue.
So that's where I'm coming from. And when you described the co-op, Valley Co-op, I understood you to say that, yes, the land and the rooftops and the parking lot is Valley Co-op owned, but the arrays will be owned by somebody else when they're paid off.
Yes. So, I mean, one thing you could do is, as Co-op Power develops arrays, so Co-op Power will be the eventual owner of those arrays. So if the town, I mean, I was trying to talk about it in terms of if the town wants to own, right? Because that was my first thinking about it.
Right.
And that still might be relevant in several ways. You know, I mean, I haven't looked at those rooftops, so I don't know. I mean, that's why I suggested PV squared, so you had a more informed person than me kind of going like, what could this rooftop generate, right?
Right.
It's not gonna be in Shutesbury.
So, you know, I mean, I guess you know, if you're thinking about one large community solar project that serves the whole town, that's not really how I was thinking about it.
And I don't think it has, I don't think, just to jump in, I don't think it has to be, like to Mira's point, you know, it could be 5 or 10 different sites. It just wouldn't be within the boundaries of Shutesbury, or maybe there'd be 1 in Shutesbury and 9 elsewhere. And so to Gail's point, like, how do you identify those? And we could, you know, and I think right now it's an open question. It'd be nice if the town eventually owned it, because then, you know what, to your point, we would generate revenue and it would help the town. But there might be another scenario where if it can't be in our town, we might not be able to own it, in which case there's some other kind of relationship.
Right. Like, so if you have, you know, if there's people from the town, I think Leslie gets her electricity through a Co-op Power array right now, then the only, if you're not looking at ownership, but you're looking at like, you know, kind of like you're looking at in a big way with the CCA, you know, in a smaller way, when Co-op Power puts up an array, you know, there could be a way in which people from Shutesbury could be off takers of that array. You wouldn't own it in that scenario. Everyone who gets some of that becomes a member of the co-op. So there is like an ongoing benefit to that. And the important thing in terms of citing for that, back to the original question, is it needs to be in the same utility. So your national grid. So it can basically be anywhere in National Grid territory in Western Mass. I think the one Leslie gets hers from is in the Berkshires.
Okay, so Gail and then Leslie, and then I actually have a question too.
So does community Co-op Power have enough that the town as such could use that as a source?
No, not as you mean as like a major source, like 6 megawatts of,
Yeah.
no, not currently.
but individual homeowners could become members of the co-op for their own use.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Leslie?
I'm trying to think through what we have and we don't have a lot in development in National Grid. We actually have more in Eversource right now. So I'd have to see, you know, I mean, I don't think we could offer it to the town of like, oh, this, you know, is like we've got lots of open space for anybody. Because we've also tended to take advantage of those low middle income incentives. Co-op Power tries to do environmental justice work too. So, I mean, it might be available to low income people in the town, but not everybody in the town. Some of
Okay.
those arrays are based on financed as low income projects.
Okay. Leslie?
So, you know, being that it's all hypothetical, whether it's in the town or some are in the town and some are not in the town, it's about just really being more sensitive to not taking down the forest to put up a solar arrays, as you guys have on Pratt Corner Road from Wheelock. So it's possible to begin the exploration, say, you know, maybe there are some sites in town, but it might not be all of it. And so maybe like the aggregates, it's like we're working maybe with other towns to create something together that lessens everybody's carbon footprint. I mean, one thing that Marianne did not mention that I've mentioned before is that I get, not only am I getting my electricity because it comes from the grid and it doesn't have to be in my town, but I get a 15% off on my bill.
Oh yeah, that's right. I did forget
Yeah.
to mention that we also, for off takers, we offer a level of energy security. I mean, I know that there's, you know, I've talked about rates hiking maybe 64% this winter. I just read some article that said electricity is shooting up, but we do try to offer our customers at least a 15. In some low income situations, we've been able to offer a 20% discount on the electricity. So, yes, thank you, Leslie, for reminding me of that.
So,
And I have one more point about that. And I wonder, I mean, I don't know that we've explored this at all, but if there are people in town that have solar on their roof, that perhaps that might, like I know people who are generating much more electricity than they need, who are very green and co-op minded, maybe their arrays can be part of something related to the town. I don't know.
Or you might
I don't
have,
know.
you know, you might have several farms that do smaller arrays and are generating more. I mean, I'm actually not thinking about it in terms of 1 6 megawatt array. I'm thinking about it as smaller arrays that, you know, this is an area would be new for us too, but I think microgrids is probably the most energy resilient, real energy resilient answer right now. Community solar is still connects you entirely to the grid. So if you're doing smaller arrays that are microgrids, then even if the grid goes down, you still have an array that's generating and serving that street maybe, or that little bit of the neighborhood. And I honestly feel like I only really honestly want to talk about energy resilient in that space. Community solar, again, this is kind of the values conversation. Community solar, I think, is real environmental justice work, and because it creates access to green energy to people who don't own homes, right? But in energy resilience, I honestly feel like smaller arrays on microgrids is probably the most in terms of energy security for a community with battery backup. And batteries are also have new incentives for at what calling like a energy resilience hub in a town.
so I have two things just to share. I mean, one, to clarify, I don't think we're advocating for, asking for one large array. I think it's just sort of the totality of required acreage, you know, so however it's divided. And I think the quandary is that, you know, we're in a small rural wooded community, so we do have that constraint that, you know, we can't just sort of find available places. So
Well, let me give
That's-
you one, Michael.
Yeah.
So, okay, the parking lot canopy at Riverside Co-op is 1 megawatt. So parking lots are kind of haven't penciled out particularly well because of the expense of the steel and, you know, the everything you need to put it over a parking lot. But with some of the new incentives, I wonder, you know, if we might think of a parking lot.
Yeah, well, I think it gets to Gail's question, you know, like, I think I mean, I know from our previous discussions as a committee, trying to figure out places out of town that, you know, we can, if there was financing, we could build, you know, and it would be owned by the town and supply the town, or I don't know what the relationship is, but I think it really gets to Gail's question of like, how do you figure out how to meet the need? And part of it is, you know, then the other part of the question is offering it to support the whole town, or is there a subset of the town? And then you're sort of figuring out there's different strategies to meet the need and what's the need. So there's that. I think the other thing I just wanted to mention, you know, because, you know, Leslie's situation of buying it is those are consumers acting as individuals who are then buying in. And so I can imagine the committee saying, you know, it's basically awareness raising to say, hey, if you want to be part of this and you want to sort of buy your energy in a certain way and get benefits, you can do it. We just have to be cognizant about how much one could offer and who that is, you know, but it's still ultimately going to be, I think, it's always going to be individuals signing up for something, as opposed to, I think it was Gail's question, you know, that co-op power can't meet the needs of all the households in town. So it's not a system-wide solution. It's sort of us advocating for an individual action, which helps advance climate and energy issues, but it's not a municipal solution. And then the third thing I just have a question about, which is, and I sort of mentioned it on the front end, but I do, as we, you know, if we decide we want to explore this more, I think somewhere we're going to get into a procurement quandary, because we as a committee and, you know, the select board agrees to the contracts for the town, but even the town, if you're going to have a contract and do work, you can't commit to it without doing a bid process. And so I think it has to be, like what I was saying, we have to frame it as sort of, how do we do community solar regardless of the vendor? Because we can't have subsequent conversations, say co-op power, or, you know, because, you know, someone's going to zing us at some point and say, you can't do that. And actually, if we do it too much, then co-op power can't even apply as a in the RFP, because they've sort of compromised themselves. So I think that's a concern. Gail and Leslie, your hands up anew. Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, go for it.
I was just going to point out that because that is individually based, it's not in competition with the CCA, because you can opt out of the CCA at any time and choose to go to a co-op power, to go to a co-op for your source of electricity. So there's still that choice.
Yeah.
At the individual level, at the
Yeah,
individual.
that goes back to Michael's both and, you know, that it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Leslie?
And the other thing is, I think maybe Marianne could chime in on this, but like the aggregates, you know, there are people in town, even in this committee, that have solar on their house, so they could choose to keep the system they have. It may not be that we need like that, you know, the 6 megawatts, because we have so many people who already have solar, so many people that don't want it. So, you know, I don't know, maybe the town has the aggregates and a true community-owned solar, so maybe, and then you mentioned earlier, Michael, I mean, I don't know about the land on Wendell Road, if the town buys it, if there might be like a brownfield there that also could be available. I don't know where that is on Wendell Road. I would never take away forest for
Yeah,
solar.
I think it's wooded primarily, except
Okay.
I think there's one house lot, you know, like there's a house there, but other than that, I think it's wooded. But that's the quandary. And did I see someone else's hand? So I think this has been a good conversation. I mean, if I could summarize a little bit, I think there's interest in figuring out. I don't think it's an easy path. I think, you know, we might want to continue to figure this out. And, you know, to like Leslie, your point, you know, is there a way of sort of saying that folks in town, if we could come up with some construct where their excess, you know, production was getting put somewhere, that would be an interesting thing. If we can put stuff on municipally owned buildings and land, that would be interesting. I think, Gail, your point is right on that, you know, aggregation, you know, with the CCA doesn't preclude any of this stuff. And at least in the short term, it might be a combination of everything until stuff shakes out. Graham?
On the total quantity of electricity that the town needs to raise, it's up more near 20 megawatts once we, if we have electric vehicles and heat pumps. So that's kind of more, and that came. I agree with the figure, but it came from the energy, the extension services person at UMass. And when I did I think that's about right. So yeah, when they said Wheelock would produce all of Shutesbury's electricity, that was, you know, 6 megawatts. That was about right at the time when people weren't using heat pumps and weren't charging electric vehicles. It was probably a little light even then. And, you know, and obviously not doing one lump of land, not a good way to do it. But yeah, so finding land is definitely the challenge. And I suspect an MLP could own or lease land outside of the town of Shutesbury. But once again, you know, you got to find a town that isn't going to zone you out for their own reasons, for their own aesthetic and values.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, right. If it's in another town, why would they? It's kind of my first question that comes up. I mean, but I would kind of really probably look at like, I would just say, how many parking lots are there? And would they pencil out now? I mean, I wouldn't like just start going for like, where's the land? I would actually start. I'm wondering if these Inflation Reduction Act incentives make parking lots a much more viable.
We have two little parking lots in town. You know, the town hall and the school, I suppose. So,
is that it?
We're not richly endowed with parking lots. We don't do a lot of parking.
Yeah. And,
there's no like commercial buildings in town either.
No.
Yeah, the AC. But there's the fear that the AC.
That's a big parking lot.
It's a good parking lot. That's true. Yeah. And
there's also the junkyard. If we could put it over the junkyard on Prime Corner. I mean, that's the problem. We don't have stuff.
Recycling center, Michael.
And what about the transfer station? Is there a transfer station dump? You don't have one.
Well, there's also the parking lot by Lake Wyola, the state, you know.
That's owned by the state.
Yes, but I think like when we're thinking creatively, you know, we can't think like it's just Shutesbury. We have to really think about where are the rooftops, where are the parking lots, and then work together with other towns. Because if we're all I, me, mine, then, you know, it's not happening.
Right, but if you think about the towns that are around us, the Wendells, the New Salems, the Leveretts, they're just like us. I mean,
well, there's the Hadley Mall. You know,
well, that's for
not that green, but everything goes into a grid. Like Marianne said, my community solar comes from the Berkshires. It doesn't have to be that nearby. It just has to be people working together to make this happen.
Well, so Gail, and then I'm gonna wrap us up with the,
So this is part of my question to you, Marianne, at the beginning. How about our going to a market in Hadley? Go to Lowe's and say, can we rent your rooftop?
Mhm.
Right.
Can we put a solar array on your rooftop for our
Yes.
town?
Yes,
Right.
you could absolutely do that. Then you have to work, on the lease arrangement with them, but yes, you could totally go, down that whole row on Route 9, right?
Yeah.
And look for big commercial buildings, and we could start a conversation, see what they say. I mean, it could be potentially be really good PR for them.
so I have a suggestion to wrap us up, because we've had a good
Yeah.
conversation, but it's a long conversation.
Yep.
I, just in terms of this last part, I would say, Leslie, if you want to move forward with this, how about you and Marianne explore? I mean, someone's got to do some research and heavy lifting and talking to people and crunching numbers and stuff. And I think just like, Nate sort of took us on the CCA ride. If we want to explore Hadley, like you're saying, well, someone's got to talk to the options in Hadley and then come back and say, this is what we found out. This is what's viable. This is what's not. This is what the costs could
Wait,
be.
you're asking me to do that for free? That's a lot of work. I
Well,
originally
no.
thought we were.
Well, I'm asking Leslie to do it, and Leslie can use you as a resource.
Leslie
but-
doesn't know enough to do that, Michael, to know that a site is viable, to know that there's a lease arrangement, to know that that's like serious heavy lifting. So there's
Well, but
Could
there's,
I just,
no,
make
Miriam,
sure,
hold
but
on.
also-
So I just want to clarify. So, this is where the rubber hits the road. So especially, this is for you, Leslie, like when you say we should just do this, we're the committee charged with this. We're all volunteers, and we're supposed to deliver information and recommendations to the town to take action. So it starts with us, and we have to gather information. Marianne, you're a resident as well. So if you wanted to volunteer, you could. But if we don't do it, it's going nowhere. And we can't get condemned for not doing anything if we're not going to start doing stuff. So this, one of the reasons we're doing CCA is that it's an easy lift and it touches the whole town. This is a hard lift, and there's a lot of research that needs to get done. And I get your point. It's a lot of work, but we can't just say we have to talk to people. Oh, we can do it somewhere else. So the easy lift is to say we can advertise co-op power for individual households who want to do it. And we can advertise CCA. Those are two things that we can manage. If we want to do really cutting edge, emergent stuff that requires a lot of homework, either we step up and figure out how to do it, or we say we don't have the capacity because we don't have the professional chops and the time. And I think that's, we don't have to make a decision now, but that's the reality of, we're a small town, or we're a volunteer committee.
Yep.
No one's, so that's, so I just put it out there. You guys can talk and figure it out, but we're having
I'm just
serious
saying,
conversations.
but if you're just gonna, I mean, maybe there's a CCA that is actually, getting their green energy from stuff that's not big solar farms.
That's
But
the hope.
you also can't just say like, oh, a CCA is green energy and not realize that you may be pushing those big solar farms to some other town nearby by creating enormous demand elsewhere for stuff you don't want in your backyard.
Right,
So
and we have had that conversation, and
Can I
it's up
ask
to
a
the town.
question?
Yeah, go ahead,
Michael?
Miriam. Yeah.
I'm just wondering if we need to be careful about clarifying, recommending co-op power, because
Well, I was saying that we have to be careful. I think we
I think
do.
we have to be careful about this. And I know, Leslie, you've had a really good experience with it, but you're also a participant in it. And so I think that you have to be kind of careful about, in our official role here, advocating for something that we're also benefiting from. So, we have to kind of be careful about those boundaries, the ethics around it.
okay, I
Yeah.
don't work for co-op power anymore, but
That's good. Okay.
I'm mostly just telling you how community solar is done.
Yeah, no, and I
And-
really appreciate what you're sharing with us, Marianne. It's really helpful, and I've been very interested in what you're saying. It's and I just texted my son about it because he's in a similar situation where he can't build solar on his own property. But I just think we need to be careful about this.
Yeah. Gail?
And I
But
also
energy
want to
co-op-
say, I also want to say that there may be other people in town or even on this committee that want to work on it. I know that I've been like CCG, boo, no. So I feel like it was almost like, so Leslie, you take this on. And it's not like I've got, a million hours of the day to give to it, but I am already receiving it. And I'm happy to work with others on it, but I'm not, just going to take it on and, go over to every mall store and talk to corporate offices. It's a start, but I don't want to.
Or like some sort of compensation at the back end. If you're using me as a solar consultant to do all the heavy lifting up front, then there's got to be some compensation if I find you a good solar site and like do all your development work for you for free, and then the town gets all the benefit. That doesn't work either.
That's a quid pro quo. We can't do that. No,
Yeah,
that's an ethics issue. We can't do that.
Exactly. Okay, so
Right, but just as Miriam is texting her son, I mean, I see this issue as just not our town. This is the whole world right now.
Right.
If we don't work together with as many towns, with as many people to create a truly green, resilient program, we're screwed.
Right. So, but practically speaking, Leslie, if you don't have to solve the whole problem and do all the work, but if you want to start reaching out to other towns and having conversations with them, I think this committee would support you doing the research to find out who's thinking about what. I mean, it's just like what Nate did in terms of interviewing other towns around CCA. Who's thinking about this? What are they doing? Are there solutions that make sense? And then, when you find out stuff, you can report back to the committee and we can have a subsequent conversation about what you learned and how to proceed. So Gail and then Graham.
2 points, and that is that electric co-ops as a generic is not necessarily your co-op power, Marianne. So, we can make that clear enough that there is a way of getting electricity by cooperative. And sorry. But the other is the point you made early on, Marianne, talking about the financing. The whole business of finding those sources and places is a big chunk. Finding the lease, that's part of a contract of somebody doing the work, and that's not for us as volunteers to figure out. But I do like the idea of talking to other communities and seeing if they have considered community power, energy, and if not, why not? And if so, what they've done about it.
Yeah, Graham?
Just briefly, it's my experience from Wild West that as soon as other towns are involved, then all of their politics and all of their opinions have to then go into play, and it just becomes a tangle of things that just go around in circles. It's like, my joke was always, it was like 20 people choosing a restaurant. They'll starve to death before they can find somewhere that, so getting more towns involved. We can solve it in our town. If we can solve it in our town, then we should. If we can't, then we won't be able to solve it in 10 towns at the same time, because it'll be 10 factorial times more complicated.
Well, having lived through the Wild West, I would say there's definitely some truth in that statement. So here I want to throw out, because it's just about 9. We sort of touched a little bit on municipal solar, but didn't go deep in it. And then we didn't really talk about the sustainable living stuff, but I think we should probably wrap up. And if it's okay with Zoe and Leslie, I know Leslie, you're not going to be here in December, so we can do the sustainable living stuff in January. We can talk about municipal solar as much as we know about it next time. And I think if we want, we could probably just squeeze in minutes and then wrap. Does that make sense? Does everyone get a chance to read the minutes? So I want to make a motion to approve the minutes. Is that you moved, Gail?
No,
Is that
I'm going to jump in on the discussion.
Oh, okay. So someone's got to move to approve them or to consider them.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So I am planning on talking to somebody at the regenerative design group. And
Do you want to talk about your stuff a little bit? I don't mean to, if 5 or 10 minutes of talking about your, the sustainable living stuff would be helpful, we can do that.
I don't have like a lot to report, a lot of
Okay.
specifics to report, but this is just kind of a procedural question.
Sure.
So I'm planning on talking to someone at Regenerative Design Group, and they're a local business that offers kind of nature-based solutions to climate change, and they have a lot of really cool tools. And so I want to talk to him and then report if that makes sense. Like, what's the procedure for, like, I want an agenda spot?
You
It's
just did
really, it's really formal, so you pretty much just did it.
Okay.
You know, and in between, you can always email me, but I think, you know, if you talk to this person and there's stuff you want us to know about, you know, just say, you know, I need 10 minutes, I need 15 minutes, I need 20 minutes, because I want to share this stuff. I think that's, you know, it's going out into the world and figuring out who knows what and what we can apply to Shutesbury. So how much time would you like, or don't you know yet?
I don't know yet. I want to hear what he says about. I know that he's worked with other ECACs in other towns to kind of assess the town on a lot of levels, and then present suggestions based on those assessments. And so I just want to talk about what he could offer based on what he's done with other towns.
Excellent.
I don't know how
That's-
long that would take.
That sounds great. Well, after you have the conversation, just shoot me a quick email and we can put it on, because I think that would be really helpful information. Thanks for taking the initiative to do that. I think it would be cool. You know, the
Okay,
other,
can I say one last thing? I know I didn't raise my hand, Michael, but
yeah, that's okay.
I mean, we really need to engage, and this is to Zoe's point. We really need to engage the town in energy reduction too. So, I mean, I'm looking for a lot of stuff now that combines energy efficiency retrofits with solar development, because, you know, to just keep, you know, you were saying like, oh, we don't have space, but everybody's just completely just thinks like we can just use more and more and more energy, and not thinking at all about the demand side reduction. And I honestly think we really need to, you know, engage people on that level too. It's just like, it's just.
Well, we
it's
definitely,
mean.
yeah, well, we have been thinking about it. I know there's conversations about converting the school to LEDs, but we have a in-between step that Gail is working on, where we can't get state investment until we make sure the envelope is secure. But I think it's a valid point, and maybe Zoe is part of that conversation, seeing, you know, what kind of information in terms of their assessment they might look in terms of that. I think the town's already doing some of it, but you know, the other thing I was just going to mention, and we could blow off minutes for next time, but we're in November. The FinCom will start having conversations with committees in January about budget process. We don't have a budget. If we wanted to get stuff into the town budget, we should start thinking about, you know, and Zoe, you sort of just prompted me. So, you know, it's sort of like, okay, if we discreetly wanted to have someone do an assessment for the town and we had to pay, you know, a few $1,000s to get it done, or if the municipal solar stuff, if we wanted to have PV Squared come in and sort of look at the roofs, we have to sort of have a list of, you know, and a budget ask. So it's something that it's not too early to think about. And I'd say by January, February, we'd want to have it something in line. So at some point it gets, you know, we're not too late yet. We're ahead of the curve, but at some point we might get, you know, later in the spring, it might be too late. Miriam?
Well, I think we need to talk about priorities, because we have two missions here. One is energy, one is climate action. We've taken on a project and a proposal for the town around energy. But if we're talking about a budget, I think we also have to be looking at some of these other kind of climate resilience issues that we've been we were gonna postpone for another meeting.
Yeah,
Because I just think we need to not put all of our focus and energy into one basket, the energy basket.
mhm. I think, yeah, that's. You had
There's a
mentioned
lot
that, I
of
think.
other things around climate resilience that this town really
Yeah.
needs help with, so
Yeah.
we
So.
need to work on that.
So I'll just say, as a revised thing, and then we could sort of wrap, is that Miriam pointed it out, Leslie pointed it out. So, and although I think Nate did a really good job of starting us thinking about this, of like, let's extract from the municipal vulnerability plan and the hazard mitigation plan, what, which is our charge, which ones we should prioritize. Maybe in that extraction, some of the climate related stuff didn't make it in. So stormwater and wells and that kind of stuff. My thinking is, those are the two starting points that are written into our charge. There's things that are not necessarily in those two plans, but I think for integrity's sake, we sort of have to start with where our charge is and then figure out, this is a huge lift just in terms of, Leslie's point, it's the world's melting. And we're a little town without a lot of resources trying to do our part. So I think what I might do is just send out an updated grid that includes more of the stuff. I'll just spend the next week or so sort of pulling out. It might be a long list, but I think if you can just go through and just do what you did before, which is like, it got rated high and I think it's low. Because in the stuff that I sent out, there's only two things that stayed the same. Everyone else had comments on, adjusting something. So if we're actually going to spend a little bit of work on something, we're going to have to know what it is. And I don't think we have a lot of bandwidth given the long laundry list. Miriam and then Leslie.
Yeah, I just, I think it's hard to prioritize things when everybody doesn't have all the information. I know we have the HMP and the MVP plans. They're very dense and I hope people have looked at them because the information is in there. But sometimes it gets lost in the weeds, but there's a lot of information there about priorities that we haven't been really talking much about. So
yeah, and we can go into the climate realm.
It shouldn't be about just what we personally care about. It should be about kind of where the town's needs are.
Leslie and then Gail.
Yeah, I want to thank Zoe for bringing up the regenerative design group, because that also is, I know some of the people there as well, and they may have some really good ideas in terms of how we can do like a community solar. For me to think, now I'm going to Home Depot and now I'm going, it's like, wow. But to really get the town thinking about regenerative design, because I think Mary Ann's right. We need, the answer has always been use less, not just take down the forest so everybody can binge on Netflix. It's like, we need to really start thinking about regenerative design. And, I'd be happy to work with Zoe on talking to those folks because I know them, or, it's a great idea. So thank you for reminding us all about that. We have resources in this valley of people who are all over the world. Like the lead person there now is in Portugal looking at chestnut farms. So, we have a lot of great resources in the valley for regenerative design. And I think our town needs to really think about knitting stuff together so that we're not just individuals. And Miriam, I looked at those reports. They are very dense, but I after looking at them twice, they all have similar issues that we've talked about tonight, including the beavers.
Yeah. So Gail, I think you're going to get the last comment before you adjourn.
I would suggest that we group a whole bunch of those specific things and decide on targets like emergency preparedness, energy efficiency of municipal buildings, stormwater management, different chunks, because then we can parcel those out among the committee and then decide on individual points within each of those topics.
Okay. Let me look at,
Or not.
No. It's a reasonable idea. I'll look and see if I can achieve it. And if maybe I'll send it to you to sort of see if I've made that work.
Just
I think,
group them.
yeah. And okey dokey. Well, thank you all. We need to actually move to adjourn, but I want to thank you all for sort of a robust conversation. I mean, clearly we all care about this stuff. And Marianne, I want to, even though it was a little bumpy, I wanted to thank you for presenting and sharing all the information, because I think it's really, information is key to moving forward. So do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay, okay. All in favor, Gail,
Aye.
Nate,
Aye.
Zoe. I gotcha. Graham,
Aye.
let's see, Leslie,
Aye.
Miriam,
Aye.
and I'm an aye. Okie dokie. Have a wonderful rest of the evening.
Good night, all.
Good
See
night.
ya.
Aye. Bye-bye.